Assalamualaikum and salam sejahtera. You are watching a very special edition of SUKSES, and for weeks we've talked about how our small, medium and even micro enterprises, this is the backbone of our economy moving forward. This is the majority of entrepreneurs that we have. But the global platform is changing. The role of DFIs or developmental financial institutions are also changing. I know Datuk Mohd Radzif has been with SME Bank for a long time. Now we'll get him to update us how he's still looking at the SME world. But before that, I want to tap into his wisdom of how do you galvanize the DFIs of this country to really spur, one, innovation, second, nurture them, thirdly, make sure that they move to the next level. So Datuk Radzif, the recent budget has given a lot of things for entrepreneurship, even for startups. VCs got special privileges just to ensure that they put more money for entrepreneurship. But you have been doing this for a long time. You've seen Malaysia move from the last century to the new. You've seen the old economy to the new industrial revolution. So I'm just going to give you the opportunity to paint the picture of where we are as far as the roles of DFI in helping entrepreneurship and also micro, small and medium, because sometimes when I go down on the ground, and you're the best person to put this in perspective, they told me that it's so hard to get financing. There's a lot of hurdles that they got to go through. They would rather sometimes use their own family's money rather than go to an institution, whereby the irony is the government is pumping a lot of effort into DFIs to help nurture micro, small and medium.
Okay, thank you Cik Kamarul for the invitation once again for this program of SUKSES. I think I am quite privileged in the sense that I think I've taken care of my SME Bank for the last 7 years. And I think on top of that, been very much involved with regards to the situation of DFIs, not only within Malaysia, but also within the Asia Pacific region, as well as the member Islamic countries of IDB. And I think lastly, as probably all of you all would know, that I think we also got included into the Montreal group, which is basically a select group of DFIs. I think the bigger ones are basically the China Development Bank, as well as the Canadian Development Bank. Now, going back to the issue regards to context of DFIs and DFIs' role, we're talking about this issue of financial inclusion. DFIs definitely needs to stretch their arms a little bit wider to be able to actually capture the market that I think has not been captured to date. And this is where the context of what negara has always been trying to push, this context of financial inclusion. No doubt that I think one of the key things that I think DFIs should be thinking about at this juncture is basically how to reform themselves to be more anti-cyclical. I.e. not to go in when the financial institutions, all the private financial institutions are going in, but to come in when the financial institutions are not playing their role well, and for them to provide the support to the entrepreneurs. So that I think is actually a key element. I think World Bank has also stated in one of its statements that I think DFIs, without foregoing the context of good governance, without going through the context of prudence, you need to be playing a more anti-cyclical role. And to be able to actually provide the support to SMEs when SMEs requires the funding most. And this is actually the time. Having been out of the bank and being able to actually interface with some of the SMEs directly, you find that there are SMEs, good SMEs out there who wants to expand their business outside the domestic market. They want to expand the business in the global market, for instance. And what more so with regards to this context of the digital free trade zone that has just been launched. There is actually a way for us to be able to play in the global market. So financial institutions that they advise to actually extend their financing in a different way and to be able to actually assist. So the difference in terms of role that I think the advisors have got to play, apart from the anti-cyclical role, is basically to be able to stretch out their arm in terms of going to this context of beyond financing. Yes. To provide the support to SMEs by way of nurturing, by way of providing them with assistance where the assistance is required, by providing that with regards to market access. And the government has got many agencies that's involved regards to providing market access. International, for instance, you have the likes of Matrade. Domestic, of course, you got SME Corp that can actually play a role in terms of fulfilling that responsibility. So there's many ways that I think the FIs can actually play their role a bit differently as compared to what is the traditional way of providing just financing alone.
Correct. Datuk, new eras, new times, new ways, new challenges. Earlier in the year when I was in Davos, the World Economic Forum has a specific track just focusing on SMEs. And you know, they have yearly round approaches. And they're non-governmental, so they move faster and they network better globally. So I want to bring that experience back to Malaysia because our DFIs are very institutional. How would they move with the digital free trade zone when we can see that the first day it went operational, there's only nearly 2,000 SMEs only that can migrate to the digital platform. But we have hundreds of thousands of SMEs. So how do we, you know, scale up, widen the net so that this should become the mainstream rather than the alternative niche? Because if digital trade is digital niche for us, then we're not leaping our SME to the new reality. And the new reality is people are leaving brick and mortar to buy and purchase more and more online.
Well, I think one of the key things that I think one has got to start looking at is basically this context of financial technology. You know? This advent of fintech coming into the market. This is actually filling a gap. This actually is not being fulfilled by a lot of financial institutions. You know, we're talking about microfinancing. You're talking about invoice trading. You're talking with regards to blockchain financing and so on and so forth. These are areas where I think the FI should embrace and to be able to actually move into these areas in a faster pace. That's one part of it. That's in the context of financing. But on the other hand, you know, you cannot provide all the support without the SMEs also doing their part. The scaling up has got to be one that has got to be driven by the SMEs themselves. The businesses themselves have got to be the one that does the scaling up, that, you know, on their own accord. So the ability to actually meet up to the market, you know, you have got to start thinking beyond the domestic market. That's a mindset shift in itself. So SMEs have got to start thinking, you know, with all this advance the government is actually providing, infrastructure, if you like, the government is actually providing. SMEs have got to be able to embrace this and to be able to change the mindset, to be able to fulfill the expected market in the future.
Correct. I have to go for the first break, Datuk, but once we are back, I would like to quote Jack Ma in Sepang when he says that this is just the new beginning because WTO doesn't work for the small people. The GATT agreement around the world doesn't work for the small people. He envisions an electronic world trading platform, EWTP, which DFTZAC is part of it. And he says, this is just for the SMEs. You know, we have to go past, we've got to build our own network because the big boys won't allow us in. And the statistic by WEF and Oxfam where only 8 families, business families of the world own half of the world's population wealth. That's equal, 3.5. But what Jack Ma is trying to lead into is that for new beginning, we need new ways and new platforms. How do we move this? Because even though we have DFIs for the longest time, SME Bank, Agro Bank, but we've been used to the old economy. How do we migrate to the new? One of the best hybrid systems that we've done is having the GLCs and the GOCs to embark, experiment, spearhead into new technical areas, new technological areas. I remember there's Petronas, but there's, you know, smaller companies given the right to go into mining data, like seismic data for the small Bumiputera companies, for example. How do we do that now? Because maybe DFI has got to work together with other GLCs and GOCs to pave the way for certain areas because small and medium might not have the know-how and the guts and the network and the expertise to blaze the trail. That we'll discuss after this short break. Hi, you're still watching a very special edition of Success, and this is just for you, entrepreneurs and small and medium enterprise, even micro ones. And I was just asking the wisdom of Datuk Radzif to look at, you know, the role. We can't run away for our SMEs, because in Malaysia, wealth creation is not just a liberal, free, capitalistic initiative, but also a venture to reshape society, redistribute wealth, or reorganize the way equation of wealth is given to us, to a lot of people. So in that sense, you've talked about financial inclusion, but financial inclusion alone cannot stand off from the main bulk of wealth creation, which is now in the hands of the few, as we have seen the statistic. So digital economy gives us a new chance to start a new supply chain that nobody has dominated, but to hope for small and medium to just spearhead that. Maybe Ziata, for example, is more than 10 to 16 countries, and so is Maybank and CIMB and stuff. Why can't we do more like China, where the moment one company blazes the trail, the others will follow? The moment Alibaba helped Malaysia to form the first DFTZ outside China, then they spearhead the SME embarkation to platforms like the Malaysian DFTZ.
Well, I guess talking purely on the context of DFI's role and how they actually should play this role, given the new e-digital platform that I think Alibaba has proposed to the government and have established in the DFTZ. I think one has got to probably look at DFIs from a different context. You know, one of the key things I think that's often discussed is this issue with regards to the DNAs of DFIs and versus the DNAs of SMEs. That in itself, I think there's actually a disparity in terms of the mindset, don't you? One is that I think that development financial institutions being banks are very much a risk entity. They like to mitigate risk, they like to be able to look at risk in the right platform, they will only come in with regards to the money based on whatever risk assessment they have undertaken. But SMEs per se are basically very much risk takers. You know, they have got to start growing the business. So the ability to actually seize an opportunity is the ability also to take on the risk. So this is where I think that gap is not being captured at the moment, and that's the reason why I think you have the likes of financial technology, and you have this digital platform that's actually been provided from the likes of Alibaba. I think it cuts across. You bring your products direct to the market. You do away with regards to middlemen, right? So you have the ability to sell your products direct to the market per se. So in that sense, I think the FIs have got to be able to actually look at it from a different perspective. I mean, this is a financing of the new generation, financing of the different needs of customers. So one has got to have the ability to actually look at it from a total different perspective per se. And how do you actually manage this element of risk, not from the traditional banking approach of managing risk? So I think that's something that I think a lot of the FIs now are conceiving. And of course, sometimes being a financial institution, you are subjected to international sets of regulations. So that also becomes a constraint, if I want to put it that way. You know, I mean, things like, for instance, financial reporting that needs to be put in. You know, which if you have the financial intermediaries like fintech coming in, they are not subjected to that kind of financial prudence and financial regulations. So in a sense, they can come in and provide financing directly to the consumers or to the SMEs in a different way altogether. So, but does that mean that the FIs have got to be able to embrace the fintech? I think they've got to start working together, because you cannot change the DNA of the...
What is the best platform for that to happen?
I think collaboration. You have to collaborate with regards to the fintechs of the world. I mean, Alipay is a good example. All right, Alipay. Now the banks are coming in. CIMB has signed, Maybank has signed with Alipay, and CIMB is coming to the fore. These are areas that I think the banks have got to start changing the way that things are being undertaken, because I think you and I, we do all our transactions on our handphones. We buy air tickets through our handphones. You know, we book hotels through our handphones. So whatever payment that we make is actually direct through the phone. So we don't go to the bank, you know, we draw the money and make payments to, or do we issue a check to our travel agent anymore? So the things have changed. So financial institutions has always been laggards, I mean, to put it that way. And to be able to actually meet that requirements, you have to be able to start reinventing yourself, to have a different set of different mindset to be able to actually match up with regards to the expectations of the market out there.
Do we have to look at new policies and new regulation? Because I have not seen, maybe I'm naive, but I have not seen any DFI's role in great Malaysian companies of the new era like Grab, for example. And they have always gone for venture capital, private capital's investment. But if we go that way, not all founders have strong networks and family ties with big networks. If somebody is fresh out of college but having great ideas and great drive of entrepreneurship, how would he or she get valued? Because in the new economy, they do not have collaterals. Grab doesn't own a single car that it has service for. Airbnb doesn't have a single building or hotel that it owns. It uses somebody else. So in the traditional banking, I used to be a banker myself. So they would ask, okay, you want to do a hospitality industry, where's your building? But if you ask that question now, it's like no new technopreneurs and entrepreneurs would be going that way. So that collaboration that you talk about might need a sandbox. Under the budget for 2018, there's now a regulatory sandbox given. So is this the kind of collaboration and experiment and testing and risk-taking management that you're talking about?
Well, I think that's something that I think our central bank has started with. I mean, they've already established this sandbox for purposes of submission of any financial technology that comes into play. That one that actually has got a play in the open market. And I'm sure that I think is the intent. But if you look at some other countries, for instance, I was told in Indonesia, for instance, I mean the context of sandboxing and going out to the market it's parallel. Okay. So you can actually go out to the market with regards to your technology, but at the same time the regulators will actually look at it from the sandbox perspective. Okay. But if there are regulatory constraints, then definitely the regulators will come in and actually provide certain advice in terms of how you can actually make sure that you have to strengthen your compliance standards, for instance, and whatnot. So again, I mean, these are new things, right? Yep. New things that's coming into the market, and I'm sure that not only the players have got to reinvent themselves. I'm sure the likes of all regulators themselves, be it central bank or be it some other financial regulators, they have to be able to actually look at it from a different perspective. Yeah. The old and tried and tested way needs to change to fulfill basically the new expectation of the new market. And I think Jack Ma says that very, very well, because you have to be able to play the game in a different way. Correct. Because you want to be able to actually capture the market in a different way. So how do you do this if you don't actually change the ways that you've been doing traditionally?
I have to go for the last break, but once we are back, I've always wondered, we talk about the availability of fund, but if we look at the Islamic market, we have wakaf and we have zakat, for example. That can be a great source of funding for the community. Social entrepreneurship, for example, doesn't wait for any regulatory financial institution or institution like by negara, and it merged together with crowdfunding and crowdsourcing, and it moves. So this is the new way. And the fact that we are the biggest initiator and still manager of financing like Sukuk, for example, shouldn't we combine all this and make for something new for the world? That's the question I want to ask about this last break. And let's talk about that after this short break. You are still watching Success, and this is a special edition. SE, or Social Entrepreneurship, Social Enterprises. It seems to be more popular to this side of the world because of the social imperative ingrained into wealth creation. But would DFI see and audit? Would there be an Accenture or ACCA for the social side of entrepreneurship? Would Bursa suddenly have another counter for the social side? So these are the questions I'm thinking aloud, because SME per se wouldn't be looking at the macro picture. But you, Datuk, with your great wisdom, can you enlighten us on that?
Well, I think, Kamarul, one has got to accept the fact that we're talking about an ever-evolving environment. I think let's start with regards to the realization on the part of the government. I think the government has also recognized the fact that this is where the evolution is going to take place. And that's the reason why the advent of Industrial Revolution 4.0 that's come into play. And then, of course, with that, then you have the digital free trade zone. Now, I think along the way, and I'm sure people that is within the ecosystem, the likes of SME Corp, the likes of Central Bank, the likes of all other institutions, are actually trying to mirror. But it's a question of speed. Yes. It's a question of speed of trying to get yourself to be adjusted towards what the market actually requires. Because on this end, the market is moving at a very, very fast pace. Yes. Right? Well, on this end, because we are behemoth organizations, you know, you have got to be able not to change the system from within, you've got to change the system from outside also.
Okay.
Okay, the regulatory standards need to be put in place, the banks have got to change their own systems to be able to mirror the expectations of the market so that they do not take unnecessary risk. So this is where I think, you know, there must be some form of realization that if the market is moving at that fast pace, then definitely all things incoming in support has got to mirror that expected requirement so that at least then you can fulfill the market needs as and when. If not, then you run the risk of being totally obsolete.
Okay.
Right? There's a caption that says that, I mean, the event of financial technology will see the death of financial institutions, banks.
Correct.
Right?
That's the worst case scenario.
That's the worst case scenario. So what these financial technologies are actually providing is basically a stopgap measure. And I'm sure that I think once the financial institutions, DFIs be it, start to embrace and start to work in collaboration with regards to a lot of these things, I think the market will come back to a point of normalization.
Okay.
And that's when I think, you know, I think everything will be back to providing the right kind of support to the right set of industries, the right kind of customers, the right set of SMEs. But the speed needs to be there. So that's one part of it.
Yes.
The other part of it is basically the SMEs themselves.
Yes.
You know, if you do not actually scale up, you do not take the advantage in regards to what the DFIs have done. I mean, case in point, basically, as this program is called SUKSES.
Yes.
They've actually built up the so-called numbers in terms of successful entrepreneurs over time.
Yeah.
But, you know, scaling up to be able to fulfill the domestic market in itself is not the name of the game these days.
Okay.
You know, you've got to be able to actually be part of the digital free trade zone, for instance.
Okay.
How can you actually bring your products to the open market, for instance? How fast can you go to the open market, for instance? I mean, these are issues that only none can actually change. Government can actually provide the platform.
Yes.
But the players themselves need to be able to embrace it and to change their mindset.
A lot of what we said, Datuk, now goes back to the human factor.
Yeah.
Talent is key now, talking about it. I mean, I've also spoken, and Astro Awani has spoken to many traditional bank leadership members, and we're talking about 6,000 to 7,000 staff who used to be from the frontline clerical right up until the officers, the current account officers, the saving account officers, as in the traditional days, and then there you have the FD and whatever not. So all this now are bypassed. So there are numbers of people that will not be able to migrate fast enough. So, but rather than see that as a block, we can see that as a future talent that can go into the new environment and system. So with that, I want to ask you this question. If the leaders are mainly still from the finance and banking and the accounting background, who has not done a single day of entrepreneurship, this is why the SMBs keep saying that the institution doesn't understand them. It's not maybe the institution per se, but the different paradigm where the leadership is looking from the basis where they are trained, and like you said, risk managers versus risk takers. So maybe the country needs a new platform beside the regulatory sandbox for where the collaborative aspects needs to be there. We're not asking for 10%, maybe even 1 or 2% of focus for Malaysia that might bring. Couples told me that if they invest 10 companies in Malaysia, they're just looking at one to be successful. Can DFI move towards that? Not for the entire basket that they have, but for just one basket from the many to park our interest there.
Well, the answer to that question is yes. I think we're going to be pushed towards that direction rather than advance towards that direction. Because if you don't move, then you run the risk of being totally obsolete.
Yeah.
So I would have thought that given the current circumstances, I mean, let me quote you an example of what's happening in Indonesia, for instance. And you have a platform that goes out to the market, that sells just purely invoices. What they do is basically they take in customers. These are a group of ex-bankers. They take in customers who have got invoices that they want to trade.
Okay.
All right. What they do then, they actually put that invoices on the platform. But of course, at the back end, they will do the assessment in terms of how good the invoices is, how good the paymasters are, how good is the borrower themselves. They put that into the platform, and then people will bid to actually bid for that invoices. So instead of one invoice, you can get probably 3 or 4 people who want to actually take because there's safety of payment.
Yeah. So
what's going to stop all these things coming into the fore later on? I mean, why do we need to go to the factoring houses anymore?
Yeah.
Why do we need to go to the banks to get working capital? Why do we need to actually, I mean, dulu we used to go to a travel agent to get an airline ticket. Now we don't need to go to an travel agent to get an airline ticket. So then there is a need to reinvent. I mean, I think talent, talking about issues of talent, there's going to be a shift of talent. Data scientists are going to be something that is going to be more demanded. Of course, data scientists with financial background would be best, because they would understand both ends.
Yes.
So these are things that I think would evolve over time. And I guess banks will be pushed in that direction. The FIs more so. And the FIs have got to play, to me, the FIs have got to play the leadership role. Why? Because of the anti-cyclical thing.
Okay.
You need to be able to come in when others have not come in. You need to be paved the way, because that's what development financial institutions is. They are instruments of government.
Yes.
So instruments of government need to be able to pave the way to fulfill what government wants them to do.
Yes.
And that's the mandate.
Correct. Thank you so much, Datuk. And you heard it here first. This is a show that Awani works together with SME Bank, and we talk about thought leadership here, and Datuk Radzif has put down the mantle there, and that's the benchmark to follow. Thank you so much, Datuk, for making time.
Thank you.
Thanks to you for watching. Terima kasih banyak telah menonton. Atakan pandangan anda sendiri kepada pelbagai platform yang ada di Asrawani, dan kita jumpa lagi dalam Sukses minggu depan. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.